Moving on to our educational items, I'd like a motion for items B1 through B3.
So moved.
Mrs.
Second.
Becker, Mrs. Shaw. Is there any discussion on any of those items? Mrs. Shaw.
Just a comment regarding B3 where we have a cost of $245 per hour for OT services. And I just felt that this was a particularly high cost that I wouldn't expect from an Ed Services Commission. I know that we had actually voted on the student to attend a program from the jointure at our last meeting, but I don't know, I don't find those to be, what I consider to be bargain prices.
And they are, based on what we believe the best negotiated price at the time. So.
For a service that must be provided to the student.
Yeah, I
And I know you
understand.
understand that.
I do.
Yeah.
It's just, extremely difficult for school districts to save money anywhere when we're dealing with, a jointure, a commission that really its main purpose is to streamline the costs associated with these services. And, for 1 hour of OT, that's a lot. And I'm pretty sure they're not paying that OT, $245 an hour.
Understood.
Anyway.
Any other comments? We'll do a roll call.
Mrs. Becker? Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons? Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion for items C1 through C3.
So moved.
Mrs. Becker,
Second.
Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion on any one of those items?
I have a question on C3. I'm just trying to find out what happens to retired buses.
Mr. Julian?
Well, was that a rhetorical question? It's not a rhetorical question.
Don't they go to the old retired buses home?
Fortunately not. The retired buses we have put online for auction, and we've been successful in the last round in really having high bid prices on them. I think we sold several for in the area of $15,000 to $17,000 each, which is a very good return.
Not bad. What do they do?
They use the
Little gymnastics schools.
Partridge Family.
Partridge Family, I remember that.
They sell fat sandwiches.
There you go.
Any other questions on those items? Okay, then all those in favor? Opposed or abstentions? Like a motion for items D1 through 7. Mr. Philipchak and Mrs. Becker. Is there any discussion? Mr. Simmons.
Item D6, receipt of enterprise profit and loss reports. Mr. Juliana, are we ever going to start turning a profit in child nutrition?
Mr. Crossville, would you like to come up and?
I didn't hear you tell
Who wants to know?
Are we ever going to start turning a profit in child nutrition? That's awfully loud. But especially since now that we've privatized part of our operations, I'd sure like to see that pay off. Mr. Crossville.
Typically, through September, October, we are playing a catch-up game because we have expenses in July and August, but no revenue to offset. So we are ahead of the game compared to last year, when we compare September last year to September this year. So in the average daily sales are up, salary expenses are down, so we are trending in the right spot.
Do we have a little forecast as to what we
Not
think?
at this point, too early.
Can we, how soon until we can get a kind of a forecast to see how the rest of the year is going to play out?
June? No, I'm kidding. We'll have something, in the next month or so.
Okay. Now, this fiscal 2015 unaudited, what period is that supposed to be covering? To date?
The 2015 is
That's
July
June-
1st,
July.
2014 through June 30.
Okay, so that's June 30 last year,
Right.
and we had those things in place then.
Correct.
And we had an almost $900,000 operating loss.
you can't go by the operating loss, you have to go by the bottom line, because there's a big subsidy from the federal and state programs.
Right? But isn't that the bottom line? Operating income?
No.
Okay, then
Your
what's
bottom
the-
line is in the net.
Where is that number?
Net income is third from the bottom.
Hold on a
The
second.
minus 46,000?
Okay, whoops. Pesky computer is shutting, okay, hold on. So we have net income then of, okay, again, it's a $95,000 loss,
And
right?
that's unaudited, that number will
Okay.
decrease.
Okay, how does that compare with years prior? Do you know offhand?
Do you want me to get it? Okay.
Go right ahead.
Everything will be addressed in detail during the audit presentation.
Okay, but
I'll
tonight,
give you-
for
I'll
just-
give you a
just for
a
Dick,
preview. As you're aware, in elementary schools, we were satelliting for a number of years. So when we went with Aramark, all the kitchens became operational again. We had a number of pieces of equipment that had to be replaced. And you know, when something sits for 5 or 6 years and we start using it again, the maintenance, there was additional maintenance costs to get those things
Okay.
operational.
All right.
Also, during the transition into the Aramark contract, we experienced additional labor costs to bring the staff up to speed to cook the recipes in those kitchens. And as I stated earlier, those salary costs are down this year, which we expected.
There were
So
some,
there was
okay, so
a
there
transition
were some
period.
one-time costs. Okay, still though, just in the interest of my question, $95,000 net loss for June 30 of 15.
Yes.
What was that for June 30, 14, June 30, 13?
I don't have that in my head. It wasn't a
Ballpark.
$95,000 loss.
Okay, it wasn't a lot, okay.
No.
Okay, well, I hear what you're saying about some of these extraordinary costs, as I will call them. We need to be watching this, because I will tell you, I personally was not in favor of privatizing any component of child nutrition, which I still am not. I want to watch that number, because we're supposed to be getting some benefit out of it. I'm just saying, I'm concerned with how that's coming. Even, again, I'm just looking at the fiscal 2015 number.
Yes, and
So,
you know, in final closing remarks, it's not just the bottom line. I truly believe the program is better, the food's better, the nutritional value's better, the offerings to the students are better. I mean, we've heard that firsthand from the student reps last year, this year, based on the parent surveys, the back-to-school nights. So I think it would be very short-sighted just to look at the bottom line. I think you have to look at the program in total.
well, the bottom line is what has been sold to us as the driver for making these changes, if I remember correctly, year after year after year. It was because we're running in the red, and our former auditor would tell us we can't do that, so we have to look outside the box. Looking outside the box is supposed to fix that problem, which is, again, what has been sold to us as the driver there. I'm just saying, we need to watch that, okay?
Absolutely. And
That's it.
We watch this regularly. We have regular meetings to monitor what's happening here. The program is not on autopilot. It's very closely monitored. There have been significant improvements from the first year startup. And you're right, we do need to keep watching it, and we have and we will.
I agree with that. There are definitely some improvements that we can see when you walk into some of these places, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Becker?
Todd, I absolutely agree with you, and we'd had this discussion, I think, in finance. Because if memory serves me correct, we were told that we could not show a loss for one more year, that there would be some kind of
It's the law.
violation of state
The state would
compliance.
take over, wasn't it?
Right, but that's not going to happen.
No, we're not in that position. No. Where the trigger was, if the program were to be in a position, and that's the direction it was heading, to be in a position where a subsidy of the program would have been required from the general fund budget. That was clearly the trend that the program was heading into. The operating loss from last year is, I believe, wholly related to the startup. As Joe noted, the sales are up, the costs are down, we're seeing much improved outcomes this year.
So that was the one-time the one-time startup costs?
Extraordinary.
It will be carried over?
We had a lot of that, with having to purchase equipment, a lot of maintenance that had not previously been done on equipment, dormant equipment, replacements, supplies that needed to be brought in, gearing up kitchens that hadn't been used in years,
Right,
and training an entire staff that had not been accustomed to cooking the way the cooking is being done now.
So when we factor out these one-time startup costs, we should not be seeing, I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at Bernie, and
No,
I'm
I
like
think
practically
I-
putting my head on the desk.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
We have every reason to expect to see positive results.
Well, do you have numbers
So
yet
wait.
from October and November, or not?
I don't have them not at this moment. I think we're still closing out for October, reconciling.
Okay, just curious, simply if your fixed costs are done already.
And again, one of the things that has to be kept in mind, as was noted a few minutes ago, is that we have expenses in the months of July and August when there are no revenues coming in. So there's an offset there. So as the year progresses, the revenues continue through the rest of the year while the expenses still remain stable.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, Mrs.
I
Shaw.
have a question on D2, and it's just an information item. This is in the transfer report. And there's an item called Take Charge of Education, and I was just wondering if someone can tell me what Take Charge of Education is.
I'm looking that up.
I think it's like the second page, if I'm not mistaken. Except I'm offline now, so I can't move it.
That is a grant, and if I remember correctly, that would be a grant that came from the Education Foundation. A PTA grant? It's a PTA grant. So they were moving some, small funds, $17.41, $16.57.
Every penny counts, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I just wanted to note that they were realigning those funds to be able to utilize them appropriately for the program.
Any other questions? Take a roll call on the others.
Okay. Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion
Motion
carries.
for items